Welcome back to Hashtag Single with Jeanette Bonner. I am not a relationship expert or sex therapist. I'm just a regular New York City woman navigating the world as a single, independent feminist. Hashtag Single is about having honest conversations with other singles in today's device-obsessed culture. So I hope you'll join me on this interesting, challenging, and complex journey as we navigate the ins and outs of singledom. Hello. Welcome back to Hashtag Single, you guys. I am your host, Jeanette. Welcome to 2021. Woo! Doesn't it feel so much more different than 2020? Actually, I don't know about you guys, but I truly am extremely hopeful for a new, safer, better year. Hopefully with some good dates. I hope that you all are hanging in there and you have some renewed hope for the year as well.
I'm really excited to bring you some brand new content and introduce you to another badass lady that I just recently met. This guest expert episode is going to feature a phenomenal writer named Acamea Deadwiler. She is an accomplished writer and author who has appeared on the local Nevada Fox talk show More and has also been featured in New York Post, Mind Body Green, Blog, Blavity Blog, Slam, Thrive Global, and Desert Companion magazine, among other publications. She has held top writer status in both love and feminism for Medium, is a top 100 contributor on Yahoo with more than 1 million page views, and her critically acclaimed book, Single That, Dispelling the Top 10 Myths of the Single Woman, was published in September and is already among the top 10 in seeking a mate on Amazon. Acamea is also an event speaker for at-risk youth in Nevada, where she currently resides. Acamea, thank you so much for being on the podcast with me today.
Oh, no, thank you for having me. I mean, Hashtag Single sounds like it's made for me.
It's really funny. Like, when I read your book, I was like, hold on. This woman and I have the same brain. This is amazing.
All right, so I'm happy to be here.
Anything that you want to, add? I stole that bio from the internet, various sources. Anything you want to add in there that I didn't mention?
No, I think that was pretty thorough. You touched on just about every notable thing I feel I've done to this point. So that was great.
I don't want to miss anything. You're like, well, I also got a Nobel Prize. Right, don't worry about it.
This. I did this too. No, that was great.
So you've been freelancing as a professional writer for a long time. How and why did you start focusing specifically on dating and feminism?
You know, honestly, that topic kind of found me. I never set out to write about that. I started as a sports writer because I played basketball in college. And in my mind, I was going to the WNBA, so I didn't need a major in college and I didn't need to worry about, education per se, because I was going to play professional basketball for a living.
Obviously.
Right. And then when that didn't happen for me and I had to come back down to reality, I had to kind of figure out what else I love and what else I enjoy doing that I also feel, that I'm good at, or skilled at. And so writing came up because it's always been something that came kind of easy to me and that I enjoyed, and I always received positive feedback from just professors and publications that I wrote for and things like that on my writing ability. So I decided to delve more into writing to fill that void left by not being able to play basketball. And so I started as a sports writer. I was writing for Yahoo Sports, covering the Chicago Bulls.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that was awesome. That was my most favorite thing I've ever done, aside from writing my book. And I also wrote for some smaller publications, still covering sports. But I started as a sports writer. And then as I progressed through my writing journey, I started writing about other things, just like covering local events and things like that. And then I got to this point where as I got older, I'm sure that had a lot to do with it. As I got older and got more dating experience, I started to, formulate opinions on them, informed opinions based on data, my own and observing others. And then especially with the rise of social media, now we get to see what everyone thinks. It really started to feed into that because, it's one thing if you think a certain way, but just when you put it out there and you say it for everyone to see, and sometimes I hate that part of it. Like, I kind of wish we could go back to the days where I didn't have to know what everyone was thinking because, a lot of it is disturbing. but so I started to always see just kind of negative connotations about women and relationships and dating, especially women who were single. And so I started just writing about my own takeaways from dating and, like I said, my informed opinions. And then it evolved to, hey, I don't like all this negative stuff that's said about single women. I'm going to start talking about that. And then it came to the book where I was like, okay, I hear similar misconceptions most often. And I just feel like I said, I feel like it's unfair and it's uninformed, and it really stems back to the whole idea of who a woman is supposed to be. And, a woman who is single or a woman who's not a wife and a mother is still, I believe, somehow subconsciously deemed less than, as though you're not fulfilling your womanly duty. And so seeing that and all these observations and, thinking about how I felt about it is what led me to writing Single That. So it's been an interesting journey to this point, but that's kind of how I got here.
Yeah, but I think the key thing to point out here is that you're at all points along that journey, you were just following your passion. Mm-hmm. Never occurred to you to have this idea to change the world. I mean, that's how I started this podcast. I was just like, I have something to say.
Right.
I'm just getting pissed off, and I have something to say, and I need to say it, and I'm passionate about it, and you are too. Mm-hmm. But that's what makes that's what makes the strongest and most interesting women. Mm-hmm. I think, we're willing to put our opinion out there against the stream or against the societal norm. Mm-hmm. To stand up and say, this isn't feeling good, this is not, I don't agree with any of this.
Yeah, you have to be willing to put yourself out there and accept, the praise and the criticism just the same, because you're going to receive criticism. Doesn't matter how great you are, how valid your point is, how well articulated. Someone's just not going to like it because they don't like your position. And the same thing happens with me. I can use my Amazon reviews as a prime example. I can always tell who actually read the book and who didn't just from the reviews, because if your review is specifically talking about me personally and you don't know me, I feel like that's a dead giveaway. Or if you say things that are completely contrary to what I put in the book, like someone started off with, I know who hurt you, and da-da-da. It was just, it was very random and weird. And I was like, okay, this person, I didn't read the book clearly. And I think sometimes people read the book with their mind already made up about what it's going to be, and how they're going to feel about it. So it's just this is what it is. But why the most of the reviews are overwhelmingly positive, but the reason why the few that don't really bother me is because of that reason, because you didn't really read the book. And also, even those that may have something negative to say, they always say, she's a great writer, but literally that's all I care about.
If you just end the sentence.
Right. If you can respect my craft and you feel like, I'm a great writer, that's really all I care about. Exactly. You don't have to agree with me. You don't have to agree with me. I understand that you aren't, but you can't say that that my skill isn't developed and that I don't excel at what I've worked to become good at.
You're right, and that is the value. And just as a side note, Amazon is a black hole of opinion. I'm amazed you read them. I would never read them.
Now that I'm sitting here, right, but now that I'm sitting here talking about them, I haven't read them in a while. And it's part of that is the reason why, is because I think, if you get too caught up in other people's opinions of you, it takes away from who you are. You start to kind of cater to that audience one way or another. Either you kind of shrink because you can't handle the criticism, or you start to cater to that audience that praises you, which I don't think either is very good. So I don't read them often. I haven't read them in a while, but that was one that stuck out that I do remember that was up there a few months ago.
It's what do they call them? Like laptop warriors or something like that?
Keyboard warriors.
Something like that. It's like the people that like hide behind their screen and they're like cheesy.
And just go off. Yeah, just go off, type and just saying anything.
They're angry.
Yeah.
Your book is like, honest to God, it's like a single manifesto or a hashtag single manifesto. Like, honestly, I want to just read the chapter titles out loud to everyone so they understand what I'm doing. But also that will explain the title of the book a little bit more. It's sort of single that, and then there's like an ellipse after that. So single, period. That does not mean desperate. That does not mean lonely. That does not mean jealous. That does not mean sexually frustrated. That does not mean unrealistic. That does not mean high maintenance. That does not mean bitter. That does not mean crazy. That does not mean hard to love. And that does not mean broken. I think I speak for everyone who's been on the podcast as a guest, and certainly for myself, that we've all been labeled or accused of being one or all of these things one time or another. I was just curious, out of all of those, which one resonates with you the most? Which one's most personal to you?
I would say it's probably a tie between that does not mean lonely and that does not mean broken. And that does not mean lonely is kind of is a personal favorite of mine, just because, or that resonates most with me, because I think that assumption is what leads to most of the other assumptions. Because you assume a single woman is lonely, now you assume she's desperate, and you assume she's crazy, or you assume she's bitter, because you're having to reconcile the idea that she's lonely with something. And if you see her as lonely, then you're going to see all of these attached negative connotations that you associate with the idea of loneliness. So I think that one is very important just because it spurns some of the others. And then that does not mean broken is, I think, really important and a favor, because I think that's ultimately what happens, with a lot of women if you start to believe, these things that are said and these negative connotations, and say you do want a romantic relationship and it's just not happening for you. It's easy to slip into that mindset of, well, what's wrong with me? Why doesn't anybody want me? So I really took pride in dispelling that one, because I just don't like the idea of us basing our self-perception solely on the idea of being single. Now we all have space to grow and things to work on, but I don't think our perception of ourselves should be based solely on a relationship status, because there are so many other factors that come into play in the makeup of who you are. So many reasons why you may be single that have nothing to do with some fatal flaw. So I really took pride in dispelling that does not mean broken.
I love that you say that, and I obviously 100% agree. One of the missions of #single is to destigmatize the state of being single as a negative place. Not just sort of like something that we need to fix. It's an interim position of like, well, I'm single now, but it's not forever. It's also what you're saying. It doesn't tell you literally anything about me.
Yeah, exactly. And we just put too much weight on it, too much stock into it, and you think, oh, just because you're single, there's something wrong, But you make a good point about just not, if just this idea that single and there's something wrong and there's this negative stigma, because there is. But also I think that's part of the problem. Even if you are just single for the interim and you want a relationship, I think it is important to not overcompensate and think like single is who you are. But then also, if there's someone who wants to be single and they're fine with that and they're enjoying their life, I think that's fine too. But it's like the outside people can't understand that one. Like, what do you mean you're happy single and you want to be single?
How dare you? How dare you be happy with that? We're all miserable.
Exactly. You can't just be single. You're either miserable or lonely or bitter, and that goes back to the myths of what I'm saying. thing. But it's totally possible, but it's like outside people can't understand that. And that's my whole thing. I'm not necessarily advocating for any woman to be single. I'm not saying be single. You know, sometimes you do need to be single. You know, it helps you heal, helps you grow, helps you learn about yourself. But I'm not advocating for either side. I'm more so just saying your relationship status doesn't define you. And whatever you choose that to be, or whatever it happens to be at this moment, it has very little bearing on your worth as a person.
Absolutely. And actually, sometimes I feel like, especially with the podcast, I'm often in the camp of like leaning into the state of being single, because it's sort of just like, I'm happy this way. So that therefore, single is okay. So I mean, the whole hashtag came about was like almost like a button or a punchline to a joke. Like I would post these bad dating stories on Facebook, and then I would finish it with hashtag single as like an explanation. Be like, this is fucking why, you know, like because I'm dealing with this bullshit, you know. And I would rather be my awesome, single, happy, independent, badass self who is single than be in some, as you often say in the book, like with someone less than or who is not of my value.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a perfect example. Sometimes you choose to be single because the alternatives aren't desirable, you know. So if you go on dates and you're not meeting people that you're interested in building a life with, or that you feel are good for you, or that there's a healthy relationship, or you're just not interested in, you know, or like you said, just dealing with a bunch of bullshit and weird stuff happening, sometimes you choose to be single because it's the most viable alternative for you, and you're happiest in that state, you know. And that's okay.
It is. That's 100% okay. I love that you include loneliness in the book, because I actually think it's the number one thing that single people complain about, myself included, when we gripe about being single. You know, it's not like I want to have kids and I don't have the option, or marriage or partnership, any of that, but I hear time and time again that people are lonely. And I think this time in quarantine has really scared some people out of their complacency and they've started taking dating more seriously. I know in the book you talk a lot about traveling solo, but I was wondering if you had any more solutions that you can offer people, especially during quarantine when we can't travel, for when the lonelies hit.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Like the pandemic and the seclusion and things being closed down, I think have heightened a sense of loneliness for people who may be single, because it's one thing if, you know, you're choosing it, but you can always go out and hang out with friends, or go to a concert, or go on a date if you get lonely or you get, you know, bored. But to not have those options and just be, especially when we were doing the whole in-home self-isolation thing, you were literally just like there by yourself all the time, you know. And you can get a little, a little bit of longing for partnership when you see other people, you know, posting their seclusion, their self-isolation videos, and they're playing board games with their families, and they're having romantic date nights in the backyard, you know, and your self-isolation is totally different from that.
Yep, just be on the couch with a bottle of wine. That's not a problem. There's nothing wrong with that.
Right. So I think it has heightened the sense of loneliness. But the major point that I try to get across with that chapter is that loneliness is a natural human condition. You know, I think it's projected onto single women that, you know, you're more profoundly lonely or broken than the average person. But we all get lonely. Like, I know married couples who sleep next to someone every night and they feel lonely, or you can live in the house with someone and still feel lonely. So it's not just specific to single women, but I definitely think it can be heightened, especially now. Aside from traveling alone, it's tough, because one of the remedies that I suggest for single women who may be feeling lonely is to get out and do things. It's, you know, it's to get out of the house. Right. It's to get out of the house. It's to take a trip. It's to, you know, drive somewhere. It's to go to a concert by yourself. It's to go see a movie. It's to, you know, get out in the world. And we can't really do that now. So it's really tough. I just suggest focusing on things that bring you joy. You can still get in the car and just take a drive and listen to music, and just get out of the house. You can video chat with friends and family, or you can focus on things that, like I said, bring you joy and a sense of fulfillment, whatever that may be. If you have a business idea, of course, now is a great time to work on it. If you enjoy writing, try writing more. If you just want to lay on the couch and watch romantic comedies all night, feel free to do that too. I think it's important to just listen to yourself and don't feel like you have to be doing one thing or the other, and just do whatever is most fulfilling for you right now.
Yeah. I love that. I love the idea of really is cutting down all the bullshit and asking yourself, getting real with it. Mm-hmm. What is it really that makes me happy? Mm-hmm. Even just a simple thing. Maybe just maybe I'll just go get some ice cream. It's really silly, but just finding things that where you can provide yourself joy and happiness, so that you're not leaning on getting that need fulfilled by other people, I think is one of the biggest aspirations and places of growth that we as human beings, partnered or single or otherwise, can really aspire to.
Yeah, and things are starting to open now, so we can get out in the world a little bit, maybe not like we used to, and I don't know that you want to do that right now, because it's still, there is no data to support that everything is back to normal. Right. So you still want to be safe and cautious, but you can still do things like maybe treat yourself to a little staycation, or go and just stay in a hotel, take a little road trip, stay in a hotel or something like that, and social distance, and however the safest way you can do it, just to treat yourself and get out of the house. Because like you said, the key is finding things that bring innate value to your life, and finding things that make you happy, finding things within that you can do alone that bring you some sense of happiness, so that even when you do, if you find a partner and get into a relationship, like you said, you're not leaning on that person to supply your happiness.
Yeah, I certainly, I never want to give that power away of needing someone to be that thing for me.
Exactly.
I think the myth that resonated with me the most was unrealistic. I have been told, very often my standards are too high. I've been told I'm too picky. I've been told I'm just quote unquote fun, and therefore guys don't find me marryable. I'm like the fun date, but not someone that someone would pick to bring home to their parents. I know, right? I was like,
well, that's mean.
They're all mean. They're all really mean.
Yeah, you're right. They're all mean.
But I just want to read this quote, if you would allow me to, because it just really resonated with me, and I think it's so beautiful. For a single woman, standards are suddenly viewed as deterrents. This is why we're single, of course. The reason is that we won't just accept whoever is willing to offer commitment. How dare we actually have an idea of what we want from a relationship, how we wish to be treated, and stick to that. When we have someone who considers himself a perfectly fine mate, and he very well may be, right in front of us, not being interested is mind-boggling. The repetitive theme of unwarranted assumptions is the problem here. It's the belief that a single woman should lower herself to the level on which others have placed her in order to snag a man. The disgrace is in trying to convince her that she is too much, when the reality is that the other party for her is not enough.
Wow.
You're like, oh, that's so good. You wrote it. It's
right. I forgot that I wrote it for him, and I was like, wow, that's good.
It's so good because, well, like I said, that really resonated with me personally. You probably can tell, but I'm an extrovert, and I've been told I'm loud. Like I said, I've been told I'm fun. I've been found like I'm silly, and all these things that we're not necessarily told were bad. But, the subtext is in addition to telling me that I'm single because I'm looking for something specific. I keep saying this to my friend Jessica, I want something miraculous. I want spectacular, and I deserve spectacular, and I'm willing to wait for spectacular. I'd rather be single my whole life than be with something that is not freaking phenomenal. You know what I mean?
Yes, I know exactly what you mean, and I think that's a big part of it. I feel the same way. Like, I'd rather be single for forever and content, than settle for a relationship than that's less than what I deserve or desire. So, and that's part of the whole thing. Like, for people to think like your being single is such an issue that you need to change is ridiculous. Like, so now it's like, oh, well, you're too loud and you need to do this and you need to do that, and people don't see you. People see you as the friend, or however you positioned it. People see you as this or that. Like, it feeds into exactly what I'm saying, is like, solely because you're single, now people are trying to find these aspects of your personality that are reasons or that are perceived flaws for you being single. Like, solely because you're single, now there's all these flaws or these deterrents about your personality. And that's what I hate about this whole thing, and the reason that I wrote the book, because that's the whole thing. If you have to change and be someone else to not be single, like, that's an inauthentic relationship. You want to find someone who loves you for you and loves everything about you. And then I think that's the truest connection, when you're exactly who you are and you match and you form a bond with this other person being who you are. If you have to dumb yourself down or water down your personality to find a mate, like, I'm not willing to do that. Like I said, I know that we all have areas to work on, whether you're single or in a relationship. We all have room to grow, but you shouldn't have to completely overhaul your personality and be something that you're not just to get a mate. And if you do that, like I said, I just feel it's an inauthentic connection, because you're not being true to yourself. So you're not going to find someone who loves your true self.
Exactly. And also just, inherent to that is like the double standard that you talk about, and this is where the feminism comes in, is like, why aren't women allowed to have really freaking high standards? Like, we should have the highest standards. Like, we are Goddess Diana. Like, no, you should get on your knees before me. Like, work for me.
Right.
I am the asset here. Like, why can't women say, like, no, I need more? Like, why is that seen as like, I don't want to say it's like threatening, but questionable at the very least.
Yeah. It's seen as a negative. You want too much. And no, I feel like there's no such thing as wanting too much. There is no such thing as having standards that are too high or that are unrealistic, especially if you embody those things. Like, there's something else I say in the book, like, if you embody those characteristics that you seek, then it exists because you exist. So it's not unrealistic. But I feel like telling a woman that her standards are too high is the biggest slap in the face, because who are you to say that someone's standards are too high? And what makes a woman worthy of a certain level of standards? The whole idea is just flawed, and it's ridiculous, and it's offensive.
And also, I just think, like, think of all of the privileges that we've achieved from women sacrificing before us. We should want the future generation of women to say, you have got no place where you have these freedoms. Like, set your standards high. Want more for yourself.
Right.
You can say that. Like, so do it. Right. You don't have to be attached to your husband's personal checking account anymore. You know what I mean? Like, live your own damn life and set your own standards. Like, we should want that for our friends, for our girlfriends, for our daughters and nieces. We should want them to have exceptionally high standards. Yes,
because it does play back into the whole idea of just what you were saying, just the whole feminism. And it's been this idea before that really a man, all he has to do is show up, and and you should be happy that this man chose you, because you're just a woman and this man wants you. And and that's why I reiterate throughout the book as well that being found attractive or sexually desirable to me isn't a compliment. Like, that's biology. So
True.
So to think, and not to say that I don't appreciate compliments, we all do, but I should say I'm not impressed by it. It carries no weight with me because it's biology, And so for anybody to think like, if this man wants you, that's something to be like proud of or some kind of privilege. It's just very odd to me, but it goes back into our archaic views about men and women and just the differences. Like you said, you should want little girls to set their standards as high as possible. You can't just show up and be a man and think that's all you have to do.
Yeah, that also makes me think of like street culture, like, you know, when you walk around, this happened to me literally 2 days ago. This guy was just like, beautiful, you know, and he passed by me twice and said the same word, beautiful, like that. And I'm like, it's phenomenal to me that, is he thinking that that's going to elicit a response? But when you said that in your book, that really like hit home for me. I'm like, all you're doing is acknowledging some physical aspect of me, super unimpressing to me. If you had said, hey girl, I like your brain, I would have turned around.
Right.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine if someone said that to you on the street? I would be like, let's go right now.
Right, like, wow, really? What?
Hey girl, I like your brain.
Yeah, and that's why I said, like, I get it. Like, compliments are a form of flattery when they're done respectfully. So I don't have anything against compliments. Like I said, we all enjoy being told, you know, that we look nice, or we have a nice outfit, or a cute haircut. You know, we all enjoy that, but it's just the weight given to it. And I think that's what leads to the point where it becomes disrespectful, because, you know, you view a woman as an object, and you think all you see is what she is on the outside, and you think you're somehow entitled to that, and that she should be appreciative of your advances. You know, when she's not, you get upset. You know, so it starts that whole cycle of events where it becomes unhealthy, because you expect a woman to respond a certain way to your physical compliments, and when she doesn't, it's an issue, or she's a bitch, you know, or she's cold. You know, when like I said, just physical compliments, yet while they're appreciated, like, they literally have nothing to do with who I am or as a person. I didn't work to be this way, you know?
Right.
You know,
it's like out of your control. Right. Yes.
All right. It's out of my control. Now, you may work out or something to maintain a certain body, but as far as, you know, your genetic makeup and how you look and things like that, like, it takes no work, you know, the gene side of it, and then the way that you dress takes little work. So it's like you're focusing on all of these things that have nothing to do with my intellect, or things that I actually have worked for, and that's when it becomes demeaning.
Yeah, or what literally defines your personality.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I'm the opposite. I'm an introvert, so I don't get the negative things that you may get, as far as like you're too loud and they see you just as a date or someone to have fun with. But I have gotten the thing about the standards being too high. And like I said in this, I just find it offensive, because, like we were saying, what gives a woman a right? Who sets the level of standards that we're allowed to have? Are they too high just because I'm single? Is that the only reason you're saying they're too high? Like, you know, I need to lower my standards. Yeah.
The fact that you have standards is too much.
Right. And who are you to tell a woman that, you know, oh, you need to lower? Like, that just sounds, like I said, is the biggest slap in the face to me, to just tell a woman, like, oh, you need to lower your standards. Like, that just sounds, it's just wild.
It's insane. It's I mean, I've never heard anyone say that exact phrase, but there's a lot of like implication and subtext. Exactly.
Yeah.
I do feel that, you know, while I've experienced much of the behavior that you talk about in the book, like people assuming you're always looking for a partner when you're at an event, or being told if how do you so eloquently say it in the book, had a quote unquote heavy dose of dick. I would relax a little and stop being such a bitch. But I have to say, I haven't had any of those experiences in a long time. Like, my family doesn't even ask me if I'm seeing anyone anymore.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. You tell me, is that good? Are you happy that they stopped doing that?
It feels to me, at least here in New York City, it feels to me as if, like, the tide has shifted a little bit. Like, I don't really feel judged by others about being single, but I often feel that we single women as a whole judge ourselves. Are you experiencing that shift at all?
Yeah, I would agree as well. I think it's definitely more accepted than it used to be. And I think things like this, like your podcast and my book, and calling people out on it has helped with that shift. So it's like, even if people are thinking it, they're more mindful of expressing it, which I feel like is a good thing. You know, if you think whatever you want to think, just don't project your insecurities onto me. That's the biggest thing. But I definitely think a lot of the pressure can be self-inflicted, just because we know the societal pressures, and we know what our family, if they used to always ask, like, when are you going to get married or when are you going to have kids, even if they stop, you kind of have that in the back of your mind. And like you said too, I've never heard the phrase flat out about, your standards are too high, but like you said, it's still the insinuations. And I think we're trying to become a more evolved society, and we are on many levels, but I do think old mindsets die hard. So it's like, even if people don't say this, their behavior sometimes show it, or their responses to their questions about dating, how you respond to things, and sometimes you can gauge how they feel from that, and that can contribute. But I do think a lot of the pressure is definitely self-inflicted, just because of insecurities that have been projected onto us, or the societal standards. Even though we're evolving, like I said, those old mindsets die hard, and you don't forget, and you kind of know, based on how people have reacted in the past, or what they said, what society kind of expects of a woman, and you're trying to buck against that and do your own thing. But it can cause some self-inflicted pressure, like, what are other people thinking of this? And okay, I'm getting older, I should get married, so a lot of it is self-inflicted, just based on past information that we all have.
Well, the way we were socialized, like, I can think, when I was a kid, we would constantly, I don't know if I had conversations with my friends, but I was constantly thinking about what I would name my kids, and like how old I wanted to be when I got married. And I'm so fascinated, like, who put that idea into my brain? I mean, it's our society, it's the patriarchy, it's that expectation that women grow up to be brides. But I do feel, like I said, I don't know if it's just people like in New York are a little more liberal, or maybe because we have a huge single culture here. It's just sort of like, oh, you're single too, no big deal.
Right, and maybe a little different.
I've even experienced, like, I work as a tour guide, and so I meet people from all over the country, and I know that values are different in different places. People get married at different ages in certain, quadrants of the country. That's like just... There are different value systems. So people will say, they assume, because of my age, do you have kids? They don't say, are you married? They jump to, do you have kids?
Yes.
And if I say, I usually make a joke about it, like, no, I can't even take care of myself, or like, like, I don't have, my plants die, like stuff like that. Like, I'll make it easy for them to feel comfortable. But often their response, and I don't know if they're doing this like falsely, but I've mostly always heard, good for you. As I don't know if it's like condescending or not, but no one has ever been like, well, you're gonna run out of time someday, you know what I mean? Like, no one said that, because I have found that, like, a lot of women are experiencing, I don't know if it's sort of like a rebirth, but, with divorce rate climbing and a lot of people trying to reclaim their independence away from their marriages, I think people are kind of saying, like, I think there's a respect around, like, nope, I'm me, and I'm going to take care of myself.
Yeah, I definitely believe we're evolving. And if I'm being honest, the majority of the time where I hear these negative stereotypes or connotations, it comes from men,
Shocking.
Right. But of course, because they're the ones that have gotten the longer end of the stick throughout history, as far as women in relationships. Women were there for your pleasure, and now we're kind of shifting away from that, and then, you don't like it. So, but yeah, and that's a key point that I bring up too. Like, when you meet a stranger as a woman, the first thing that they ask of you is usually if you're married or if you have children. It's like immediately, like, that's what they see you as, and that's what they see as defining attributes about you. Whereas to men, one of the first questions is normally, like, well, what do you do for a living?
What do you do? Isn't that so interesting? I think it's just, it's a mirror, right? So when I meet other single women, obviously they don't ask me if I'm married or have kids. The women that ask me those things have kids. So what they're trying to do simply is just find a connection.
Connect, yeah.
Yeah, and say, so if I say, oh my gosh, yeah, then we can get into that. Oh my God, how old is yours? And like, are you troubling with, homeschooling? Whatever the hell conversation they have. I don't know what they talk about.
Whatever they talk about.
Right. But with men, like, their value is often associated with how much they earn and what they do for a living. So that is their position, and that's the way they will navigate themselves in relation to you as well? Like, what do you do? Can we talk about something in common?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's part of the problem. Like, a man's value is rooted in what he does and how much money he earns, but a woman's value is still rooted and through a lot of people's eyes, it's still rooted in whether you have children or
motherhood.
You're a mother or a wife, and your relational aspect of your life, not necessarily other things, which is unfortunate because, like I was saying, I mean, we're many things. We work to do things and achieve things, but it's like it's kind of diminished by these other aspects. I give an example in the book of how I went to this like amazing conference and I learned so much and I went sightseeing. It was my first time in Washington, D.C. But then when I came back, one of the first questions that a friend asked me was if I had a one-night stand, So it was like,
oh my God.
Yeah. So I was like, I wanted to talk about all this amazing stuff that I learned in the sightseeing, but it was like all people were caring about was if I met somebody. So it's just very odd and interesting to me that just seems to always be top of mind for other people when you're a single woman, even though we're evolving. And I agree that our socializing has a lot to do with it, because same thing, we all played house when we were little, and you were the mother and a boy was the daddy, and and you had kids. So we all played house, and then socializing, I think, I know it's not even always overt. It's not always someone saying you should do this, you should do that. It's what we see, it's what we hear.
Yes.
It's movies where there's a damsel in distress. It's movies where a woman is living a horrible life like Cinderella and a man comes and saves her from it, So I think all of those things contribute to this socializing of, women just being there and then having men come in and save us from ourselves.
Do you think single women are threatening to people?
I think they are. I think they're threatening to the system. I think they're threatening to the idea of what we've had. And like I was saying, why I hear most of it from men, it's threatening to their status in the world. So now it's not good enough to just be a man, and women are starting to decide that we're more than just here for the pleasure of men, and maybe things aren't as easy for you as they used to be. So I think it's definitely threatening to the status and threatening to our ideas, our societal ideas, and people look at that as deteriorating society. Like there's these values and now we're changing them. But and I think that's part of the problem, that oftentimes we're not allowed to be individuals and we're not allowed to be people in an innate sense because we're trying so hard to fit into these established set of values.
Yeah, the whole, it just makes me laugh. Like the whole well, if women stop having babies, like how are we going to populate the planet? And you're like, what? Wait, no one stopped having babies.
Right. No one stopped. No one's going to stop. Right.
I think. I mean, we're talking specifically about straight relationships here, but I think like men can feel a little fearful and threatened because this is my personal opinion. Everybody, it might be a little spicy for some of you, but I believe that now men have to step up their game. Like you said, it maybe before you just had to show up and be like, and ask her dad out for a date. Maybe that's like really a long time ago, but like, you know what I mean? Like now, no, like you and I talked about our own personal standards. Like it is not enough. You better, you got to climb all the way up to 100 to tell me that you're worthy of what I want in my life. And maybe that's scary, like that you have to work harder to win a woman over.
Yeah. Or that you're not viewed as this prize anymore. Because I think that's the biggest part of it, that men have been viewed as a prize. Even if you think about, like, if you look at relationship coaches and dating coaches, I wrote an entire story on why there's so many male dating coaches who are coaching women, who are women's coaches. So and one of the coaches said that it was because he's never come across a guy that said he wanted to learn how to connect better with his wife or with his girlfriend. It's always the opposite, where a woman wants to learn how to connect better with men or with her husband. And that, to me, is a big problem. Because you should want to connect with your wife or your spouse or your partner, but it's this idea that for a woman to snag a man and to get a man to marry us, it's an achievement, and he's a prize. And that view, I think, has made it maybe a little easier, because it's like, okay, I want you, I want to marry you. And it was just like, if I'm flattered. It's like, okay, he wants to marry me, but now it's just like, oh well, I don't know. I don't think this is gonna work. And
yeah, or what if I don't even want to be married?
Right,
Right. Like, there's tons of women that are just like, I don't want that.
Right, and it's kind of like, what? How dare you? So I think there's maybe some hurt egos out there, and but you don't like that. You don't like that if your ego is wounded to the point where it makes you feel insecure about yourself. So I think that's a big part of it. And though we are evolving, like I said, it's just the whole thing, our old mindsets just die hard.
Yeah, and change is uncomfortable.
Exactly.
Of all the qualities that you list, loving yourself, being comfortable alone, staying positive, forgiveness, self-help, which do you think is the hardest for women in today's society to embrace?
That's a good question. I think embracing spending time alone is probably the hardest, because it goes back into kind of what's been ingrained into us. We've been ingrained, since the time that we were little girls, to aspire to marriage. And I feel like I don't feel like this is specific to heterosexual relationships. That's mostly what we've been talking about, and that's because I'm heterosexual. But it doesn't matter even if you're not heterosexual, just partnership in general, we've been taught to aspire to that. And I understand that there is a biological aspect where humans are wired for connection. But it's this idea specifically with heterosexual relationships that we are to aspire to marriage, and we're taught that from the time that we're girls. So when we get older, I think that's the hardest part, the spending time alone, and we don't want to be viewed as lonely, and we don't want to be seen as spinsters, and we start to think that maybe there's something wrong with us, and we don't want the just the judgment of others. So I think that may be the hardest one to get comfortable with.
I think it's also about settling up the conception of yourself that you had when you were little. Like, did I ever think when I was younger that at 40 I'd be sitting here in my own apartment by myself, single? Like, this is not what I had imagined for myself. And so reconciling those two images of like, well, this is how my life ended up, this is not what I had planned or expected, and being at peace with those two images, I think that's one of the most uncomfortable pieces for women, like you said, we all expected to be partnered up.
To be different.
By a certain age. And if you're not, what does that mean?
Yeah, exactly. When that vision that you had for yourself in your romantic life doesn't align, you do kind of have to reconcile that later on, because I feel the same way. I thought that I would be married with children, by my 30s, and that didn't happen for me. It hasn't happened that way for me. But I think what's important to really look at is why you set that timeline. Like, why did you have that vision for yourself? Did you really want that, or did you feel like you were supposed to be in that place? And I think that's the biggest difference, because a lot of times it is just because we felt like we were supposed to be married with children by the time we hit 40. And so when that doesn't happen, you start to look at it. But really, why did you have that vision for yourself? Why did you set that timeline? Did you really, really want that? Or was it more so you felt like that's what was supposed to happen?
Right, exactly. That's what women do. And hopefully we can, I believe, with your work, with my work, with what we're seeing, like in movies and television and stuff, like, I feel like things are starting to shift. And I have hope for the future generation that they're just going to be badass women that have men if they want them, or have partners if they want them, or just live their own badass lives.
Yeah, and be totally comfortable and confident while doing it, because I think that's the big key. But I definitely have tons of hope. This younger generation, I feel like, is so much more evolved than those that came before. I think there's really a shift with them. So I agree. I hope they do grow up to view themselves that way, as more than a relationship status, is more than someone's partner, and be confident in whatever relationship status they choose.
Any future books in the works for you?
No, not right now. That was kind of my big one that I really wanted to get out there.
But it's not even like a year old, so let me not make you feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, no, not at all, because that's the key thing with a creative, is you're always on to the next project or thinking about the next idea. But with this one, that one has been something that I really wanted to get out there, and I've done that, and so now I'm just focused on continuing to push the word and expand the awareness of it, and that it's my sole focus right now.
I love it. And like I said, I'm just claiming it as the #single manifesto. If you don't mind. If you guys are listening,
I love it.
You should absolutely go buy Acamea's book. I found it on Amazon. I'm sure it's available at smaller retailers if you're anti-Amazon these days. Mm-hmm. Some people are. But I think it's just... You're a great role model for a wonderful, empowered woman who's doing the work to shift the double standard in society. So I can't thank you enough. If you guys want to learn more about Acamea and her work, I'm going to post some links in the description of the podcast episode. And we'll tag you in socials and stuff like that if you're okay with people reaching out.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I love
questions or something like that. But it's really been my pleasure to speak with you today, especially because you're I just loved getting dirty about all this stuff that pisses me off. It's so great to just talk about someone who gets it.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It was so refreshing to talk to someone who gets it, instead of me having to kind of try to explain and, like you said, not make anyone uncomfortable. It's okay, you're right here on the same wavelength, so let's just get to it.
We were meant to meet. The universe needed this to happen. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you're not already following us, we just launched a brand new Instagram page, which I hope will become a hub for all things #single and bring the single community together in a positive way. So you can find us at #singlepod. And as always, if you enjoyed this episode, be sure you share it with someone you love. That is it for this episode of #single, you guys. We will catch you next time.